my people in the Western Zone did in visiting Viking freight. And I have a whole list of things here to talk about at the appropriate moment, and I don't think it's right now, that has to do with Viking freight and how they do the freight business differently than Frito-Lay has ever done it. I'll give you just one idea that will sort of analyze your mind and thinking in that particular area. In Frito-Lay, we bid out runs and award them on the basis of seniority. And what we'd like to think about, what Viking does, what we'd like to think about for Casa Grande, is the concept of awarding bids on the basis of performance, on a merit review. And we're talking about having a once every 3 month merit review with each of the drivers, giving them a ranking based upon about a dozen different factors, and awarding the runs on their competence. And we'd like some help from you all and from a specialized team within distribution to design such a system so we can break this reliance upon seniority. Because one of the things that makes Viking relatively successful is their ability to reward drivers for their performance rather than doing what is traditional across the United States, which is to award runs and all sorts of other things on the basis of seniority. If we can break that, that's just one example of the type of step forward that you might be capable of making. But anyway, the Viking visit was extremely useful. Had a lot of insight into things that are the types of things that we would like to see happen in the delivery function at Casa Grande. So we'd like to talk in a lot more detail about some of those ideas at the appropriate moment. As a next step, some of the things that I see as having to happen to bring this to a conclusion and really firm up the design of the delivery function would be, first of all, we're planning on having a specialized meeting in Dallas that has to do with talking about the specifics of the delivery function. We'll have people such as my ER specialist, Doug Arnold. We'll have probably some other distribution people on it, and we'd like to have a couple people from this group, the PAC group, probably Karen and Tom, as an initial starting point.
When will the meeting occur and what's the purpose?
Pardon?
When will the meeting occur? And
the meeting will occur in about sometime the next 3 weeks. We haven't set the schedule. We were trying to do it for next Tuesday, and that fell through. But the objective is to basically design just how the delivery function is going to happen in Casa Grande, and to incorporate as much as possible some of the ideas that we saw in the Viking visit into our particular operating plan here. And we're trying to get a group of people together to really study that in some detail. Another thing that's happening is that all of the zone distribution managers, like myself, are going to be participating in HBS training, which is going to happen, I guess, the 4th of March for a full week. That will give us a little bit more background that will allow us to function more effectively in talking about Casa Grande things with some of my peers in the distribution function. We are also doing the DEA, the distribution efficiency audit, that I think I've mentioned already. Some of the key issues that we'd like to talk about as far as the delivery function are the subjects such as compensation. How might we do that differently than we have traditionally in the past? Hiring. I'm particularly concerned about having some agreement with Wally and his operation in terms of promoting people out of who are very successful people in the plant, either in warehousing or in some of the processing teams, promoting them to become drivers. We'd, I guess, like to commit to train them to become drivers if they know all the rest of the things that are important.
We had several potential packaging concerns that none of us really felt confident to deal with yesterday.
Packaging room?
Packaging room, yeah. And what we want to do is go back with the engineering folks that raised those concerns, review them, and find out if our startup scenario will be sufficient to resolve any problems that might come up on startup. And Kent will do that by 1st of April. Okay. That is the plan that we envision for starting up that we would recommend you follow to start up the various conversion units. Bob wants to talk a little bit about some of the key activities that are going to occur prior to we get into the actual startup day.
The Phase A and B test plans we have to be completed by 5/14?
Yes, 5/4.
5/4?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we might have a mother issue with regard to the timing of those plans. In other words, I just go back to a meeting we had, is April 1st is planning completion date and the rest is execution. And being able to manage that in. I guess my suggestion is can we kind of rough out what that might look like before that time for some review purposes?
Yeah. Yes, we can. I would, hopefully we have it, we can get it done quicker than May 4th. We just chose that date, because that still left us 2 months to understand it prior to startup.
Okay, that means that 5/4 date needs planned buy-off of those plans, correct?
No.
Or
When we originally put it up, Jim, we intended to have our version done, and we were going to circulate it to the plant, to the PAC committee, and say, this is what we intend to do, comments, questions, concerns. Now, we will work to try and get that done earlier, because I realize it's critical to your ability to start up the plant on time. But personally, I think the 5/4 date would be acceptable to get the job done. Now, we need to move it forward for other concerns.
Which impacted that, the first being developing the criteria and then hiring the specialist and generalist. The criteria is a combination of our affirmative action plan and then a decision by the plant, which is the Casa Grande Planning Committee or Planning Group, to what that hiring criteria, what type of person we were looking for. We felt it's important to do that early. We would need to start getting some type of specialized technicians on board sometime in March, and then proceeding on through. And we assumed that there would be a 3-week training period required in the as far as the classroom training. Don't know if that matches exactly, but this date can be adjusted. That's when we would want to bring the last generalist on, or all of the generals. But there's going to be some movement in here depending on what, as we detail this thing a little bit more. But hiring those technicians was something that definitely impacted starting up of that equipment for the startup.
Is that 3/19 date real, Bob? To the best of your knowledge with regard to the warehouse?
The earliest it could happen.
The earliest or the latest?
I sent a note through last week to Rick Ryder, telling him that Eaton Kenway was going to have to flex its schedule a bit in terms of training of technicians. One of the things that Kenway has recommended is that we might send our technicians out to another system that they have funded, so we would get the same kind of hands-on training that they want our technicians to have. So the 3/19 date is reasonable. We can make it later, assuming Kenway has another system that's coming on that the technicians can be trained in. There will be no real work for those technicians to do, quite frankly, up until about 1st of May, middle of May, sustained work. So bringing them on 3/19 was only for the purpose of giving them exposure to some things that they would not see during normal operations. That's why the 3/19 date.
Why wouldn't that happen here?
Because Kenway has already started. I mean, they've already started those debugging. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Kenway has gone beyond the point where our technicians would benefit from a lot of the hands-on stuff. So all Kenway would be giving them now would be like textbook training and some out on the floor stuff that would be theoretical. If this happens, here's what you do, or go through the troubleshooting guide. But what they see during the checkout phase of a Kenway system is all those things that might just get screwy one night.
There are other needs to the plan, just identification. We felt that, in fact, this ties into that probably sometime in the early May was when we would need to start ordering those things that would be necessary for the startup. And those administrative services necessary for that would at least have to be in place by that date.
performance measurement system will provide the Casa Grande facility with the ability to measure results against ongoing goals. And we think if that's all that the goal setting provides, that will put them in a position to achieve a high-performing system. So in fact, what we see this as a short-term and long-term type of mission statement for Casa Grande. I'm going to turn it over to Steve to let him walk through some of the financial indicator implications, and then we'll go through the rest of the presentation.
As I said yesterday, it helps to review the financial structure of a salty snack, and in this case I picked potato chips, in order to help understand why it is we're paying a lot of attention to all these different variables, including quality and service to sales. If you take the 1983 performance of Frito-Lay and potato chips, it works out something like this, where you've got the retail price is what the consumer pays for the bag in the store. Some of that price goes to the retailer to take care of the retail margin. He's got to make a profit just like we'd like to. Distribution could cost us a certain amount of money to get it to the shelf, and that's about this much of the total. Advertising and merchandising, we had to put some commercials on TV in order to make that housewife think about our product as she walked past it in the grocery store. General and administrative costs, my salary to get up here and make this presentation, a lot of our other selling expense, this is the salesman buying gas for his route truck and taking the time to put it on the shelf and make sure it looks nice when it's on the shelf. Cost of merchandise manufactured, and as you can see, of the total store door value, which is Frito-Lay's income, cost of merchandise manufactured is the biggest piece of this. Now, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of the dollars we're talking about across the whole company, I just picked potato chips, and again, these are 1983 approximations. Yeah, you'd probably be able to pull out some accounting reports that will refute every single one of these dollar numbers over here, but these should be in the ballpark, however. Okay. Potato chips. Store door value, I left off retail price because retail margins go up and down like the wind. So store door value is what Frito-Lay's income is. $723 million was the value of all the potato chips that manufacturing made in 1983. And the approximate breakdown for potato chips is like this. Another source of inaccuracy here is the way that we allocate indirect costs, which we'll get into a little bit later. This is approximately how much money we're talking about. And of these, as you can see, the cost of merchandise manufactured is by far the winner in size of exactly which one it is. Out of $723 million, about $330 million was the manufacturing cost.
That's all the plant costs, including just depreciation?
That includes depreciation or even the non-cash.
No, you're in G&A. You're overhead.
We have time and again heard that the accountability for manufacturing are number one, quality, number two, service to sales, and number three, cost control. And what it looks like we've done here is jump right into costs and just pay the normal lip service to quality and service to sales. That's not really true. We really are concerned about this profit up here, the financial implications of the business. And as we're going to see on the next slide, quality and service to sales have very significant financial implications. What I've done here is I've split out tried to show the timing of the way the money moves in and out of the company. Okay, just take maybe one bag of potato chips. Okay, what do? The first thing that happens is we invest. Frito-Lay pays out money for all these things. Okay, we spend, that's about 75% of all the income we think we're going to get from that bag. Okay, that's the money going out. In order for us to end up making a profit, somebody out there has to make the decision to buy that bag. Okay. Now, we want to do everything we can to make sure that decision happens. You know, that the consumer says, yeah, I am going to buy that bag. One of the worst things that can happen to us is for us to put bad quality and spend all this money on a bad quality product, put that bag on the shelf, and the customer says, don't want it. Okay, what have we done here? We've thrown away all that money. Okay? And you can see that the distance from here to here is a heck of a lot greater than this little profit that we thought we were going to make on that bag. So rather than making this much profit, we've lost this much money. Okay? That's if we make bad quality. If we don't make the bag at all and don't give it to sales, even though sales knows they can sell it if they have it, again, we're not putting it on the shelf, and the buy action is not possible on the part of the consumer. Okay. Granted, if we don't make it, we aren't going to incur some of these comm costs and some of these other costs. Other costs we are going to incur, however. And so the total cost of not giving the bag to sales is at least this profit that we could have made on the bag, plus any of the fixed costs that we're going to incur whether we make the bag or not. Okay. So quality has the largest by far financial implications, and those are long-run implications. Okay. Service to sales is the second largest financial implication. What we're going to move into next is the cost control piece. I wanted to show this though because to illustrate that quality and service to sales really do have significant financial implications. And yesterday I mentioned that one way to ensure ongoing financial health of a corporation is to avoid financial disasters. Okay. Making bad quality is a long-run financial disaster, as this demonstrates. And not giving the bag to sales to put on the shelf is another financial disaster. So that's why those are 1 and 2 on the priority list. Okay. Now down here, I've got approximately 2 weeks for that timing. That is a real approximate number. I've seen that time be as short as 1 day, you know, where we're promoting, you know, 8-ounce ruffles or something, and the day we make it is the day it gets sold. And I've seen it, you know, it could be as long as the shelf life of the product. Okay, so that 2 weeks is, you know, kind of an approximate number, but that main thing there is to illustrate the time. You know, we spend a whole lot of money, and sometime later on, somebody's going to buy it for a little bit more than what we spent to get to the shelf. What I've done down here is taken the comm piece of the total financial picture and broken it down into the various significant pieces. Okay, we've got, most of you are familiar with the terms direct and indirect costs. The direct cost is anything that you can really pin down to a product, like potato chips. If we buy a potato, we know that's going to be for potato chips. Indirect costs are things you can't, or things that it's difficult to tie back to a product class, like a mechanic who fixes, you know, 10 packaging machines in 4 different compartments in a day. You can't really tie him back to a particular product class. So direct cost is about this much in a traditional plant. Indirect cost is about this much of the total comm. So that's about 70-30 split between direct and indirect. And the next breakdown inside each one of these is biggest piece by far is basic. Okay? That's about 33% of the total cost of merchandise manufactured. That's why one of the most common words you'll hear in a plant is yield. You know, what's our potato chip yield yesterday? What's our Dorito yield? Well, 33% of all the money that you're paying out to manufacture the product. Oil is, it's not the second largest, but it's a significant piece, as you can see right here. Percent oil usage is the performance indicator in all but tortilla chips, where we use percent standard, because percent oil usage really doesn't tell you a whole lot at the product class level in tortilla chips. It's very mix sensitive there, so percent standard in tortilla chips is what you're going to see. Working on down the list, pretty much the way it's set up in the accounting reports. We've got packaging material and cartons. I lumped those together. I wish I'd shown how those split out. Packaging material is about 3/4 of this piece right here, and cartons is about 1/4 of it. But that's a very significant part of the con. 17% of all the dollars. Well, another thing you'll hear quite often in the plant is, what's your packaging waste? Packaging waste, percent packaging waste needs to be expressed in terms of percent of the dollars wasted, as opposed to the percent of the impressions wasted. I know we changed our accounting report, or the WPS report, to reflect that. It's the best illustration that I've seen on that is that if you've got 9 pennies and a silver dollar, you got 10 coins. If you throw away the silver dollar, you've only thrown away 10% of the coins, but you've thrown away a hell of a lot larger percentage of the money. So that's why we measure the percent of the dollars that we're wasting. Okay. The next thing I've done is I've put all the labor categories together. There's some in indirect and some in direct, but I put them all together to see the relative size compared to all the entire com. Here we've got direct labor, and I drew a dotted line between to show processing and packaging. Okay. Processing labor, packaging labor. Moving into indirect labor, we've got, you can see that that's a little bit bigger piece of the whole versus the direct labor part. And then the next thing that's very headcount sensitive is employee benefits. Okay, so if you take, and I wish I'd used colors on this, but if you take this box right here, which is the direct labor, indirect labor, and employee benefits portions of the accounting reports, put them together, you can see that that amounts to about 23%, almost a quarter of all of the cost of merchandise manufactured that we're incurring. So that's why we're also very concerned about labor productivity measures. How are we doing pounds per direct labor hour or pounds per total labor hour? And that's something that indicates to us a good piece of the total cost of the plant. Okay, moving on down, the last couple we've got maintenance and operating expense. Maintenance meaning maintenance parts, the 301 account, primarily 301, 311. And operating expense, the bulk of that is the energy accounts, but we also have 201 as the other significant, that's the operating supplies. But energy is by far the biggest piece of the operating expense account. And we've got BTUs per pound as the performance indicator for that. Now, the reason that that we've split this out and broken it down into the major categories is to lay the groundwork for the next piece of this, which is going to be how do we want ourselves to be measuring Casa Grande's performance? Why did we select certain categories? This should make it fairly clear why we've selected certain categories and left other ones out, or seemingly left other ones out.
Okay. Accounts, and the list we've come up with, quality area. There are a lot of indicators, but we felt the key indicators, and I'll go why, and some of the reasons why we picked 2 of them later, but the key indicators we felt were market QI, or
if we can control the QIs, you know, for the most part, quality will fall into place. Once, service to sales, and in this case, produce, particularly because that's the one you have the greatest handle on. That's the one you're making, that's the product you're making in your plant, and you're responsible for getting to the salesman. In the cost area, we're rated a number of things. The first one's plant performance rank, and probably there are quite a few people here who don't know, aren't familiar with that term. And what the plant performance rank is a system of the quality assurance, the corporate quality assurance department has put together, which basically takes product. In the case of the national QIs, takes products off of the shelves from all over the country, sends them into headquarters, and literally tests them for all aspects and rates them. And there's a rating system, and I don't have all of the, I don't have a breakdown of what all the points are.
This is set up on pretty much the same scale. You won't find a one-to-one, for example, the plant might rate a
Plant with the following type of information. The first group of information is historical. We're going to take Frankfurt, Charlotte, Killingly, Rosenberg, and graphically portray potato chip yields, potato chip oils, potato chip percent packaging waste, and potato chip direct labor performance from 79 to 83, just to show how those plants have trended and where they are today. In addition to that, we're going to take what we consider to be general plant indicators that are more indirect in nature for those same plants, and provide you with pounds per indirect labor hour, pounds per total labor hour, accident rate per 100,000 pounds, and carton trip average. Again, 79 to 83, those four plants as what we consider to be the general indicators that Dave was showing on the original chart. Now, in addition to that, we've also acquired some information on the first 6 months of potato chip performance for Rosenberg, Killingly, Frankfurt, and Charlotte. And this is 6-month average. It's something that might enable the plant to say, hey, this is where we think we should be in 6 months, or this is where we think we should be in 3 months, or this is how the other guys did. We'll make our own decision on where we want to be. And we will provide in a bar graph format, again, potato chip yield, potato chip oil, and percent packaging waste. Again, it's based on what available information exists. Some information, as we have found, is very hard to come by these days, especially historical. We see that as the history book piece of data gathering. We think that this is a nice fundamental, something that everyone should look at and say, well, this is very nice. This is what the other plants did, but so what? And that's how we feel about it. Our final data that we want to present is what we consider to be the 83 performance data. Every indication is that 1983 was a performance record year, all things considered, relative to all measurable performance indicators. And what we're proposing we do is not only take those 4 plants as, let's see what they did, we're also going to take, or attempt to take, the best performing plant in a product category. In other words, if Fritos happens to be Monroe or LA or Orlando, we'll throw that up as a comparative plant. We're also going to throw up the 83 Frito-Lay average. And then in addition, we're going to throw up the, quote, the known Dennis Frezzo, Jim O'Neill 87 goals right across the top, just as a benchmark. We're going to provide, in addition, year-end 84 Casa Grande plan. Rather than looking at an average, we're going to take 13th period performance, so to speak, and say this is what the plan calls for. And we're going to lay that in as one of the bars on the chart. And just leave a blank spot for the steady state goal for the plant to pick. We're going to do that in potato chips for yield, oil, packaging waste, and pounds per direct labor hour. We're also going to do that for Fritos, and we're also going to go do that for tortilla chips. So you get 3 of these with 83 current, 87 goals, etc. In addition to that, we're going to also do again, what we consider to be the plant general goals: pounds per indirect labor hour, pounds per total, accident rate per 100,000 pounds, and carton trip average. Same measurement group, same plants, same criteria. In terms of 83 Frito-Lay average, the high-tech plants, whatever we have, we're going to lay into those graphs as the most current high-performing groups that we could find to date, so that it will enable you to say, this is how high I want to go in our steady-state performance. The intent here is twofold. The intent is to provide you with enough information to set your own goals in the steady-state mode, and also to encourage you to say, okay, from date of startup, how quickly do we want to get to the steady-state goals based on what we have seen historically and based on what we think our high-performing system can achieve. You may select that in 6 weeks after startup of UTC, you want to be in steady state. Great. Hopefully this information will allow you to do that. There's some additional information that we're going to provide. We have done some pretty rigorous reviews of 83 performance in some other areas, and we've got a data sheet comparing 6 or 7 or other key performance indicators with these comparative plants that we will also provide, and we're going to put it together in just a data book and say, here you go, here's history, here's best performance, and here's the blank spot for you to pick steady state. And again, when we get into action plans, we'll tell you what we want from you so we can make this come to reality. But that's basically what we thought would give you the most input to determine your own goals. I'm going to turn it over to Dave now so he can talk about a reporting format to give you feedback on your operating results towards achieving the steady-state goals.
I think one of the keys here, and I think Charlie Cotton stated this in the Area 3 review we had last week, is that the 84 plan numbers would give you, would without a doubt give you one of the best startups any plan has ever achieved. And they're very ambitious, but they're only the start too. The major impact is potato chips. We'll take the potato chips first. These are the, as I was explaining a minute ago, these are the factors which go into the plant performance rank, down through packaging labor. These were your December 84 plan numbers, and these are the points that generates. The key here, it would generate 7.97 points. The key there is that would make you the number, 1983 would have made you the number 4 plant in the Frito-Lay system, which for a startup plant is not all that bad. It's very ambitious. That would have left.
I was winging it, guys.
The rest of know you're winging it.
You're going to leave some for 85, right? This is what the 84 Casa Grande plan looks like.
The December 84. If you look at your plan, you start in like June with a fairly conservative plan for startup and work to a December number, which is kind of your step into 85. And we took that December number and use that. That's what these numbers here are.
So
now
that may not be an average over time.
That's just that's where you want to be at the end of the year.
It's essentially the best performance. It's the best performance for 84.
Right. It's the best you'll be in
That's
84
what it is,
according to plan.
according to plan.
Not the average.
have zeros for process and packaging, right?
0% to standard.
Percent to standard.
Okay. Packaging labor, processing labor are measured as percent to standard in both the directs. Packaging waste is a $1%. Steve went into that. And then yield and oil. Currently, oil is measured as a percent of the product. I believe this year they're converting to percent to standard to eliminate some variations in that. And of course, yield is yield.
The lower the number, the better.
Depends. Yield, the higher the better. Oil, the lower the better. Packaging waste, the lower the better.
I mean, total points.
Well,
Total points, the higher the better. All of these points here are oriented so that the more points you get, the better off you are.
you said oil, the lower the better, only to a point. You get to a point where you're below the specification.
This is, remember, this is cost when you assume you've gotten your 95 QI.
Oh, okay.
If you have a 35 oil, you won't have a 95 QI. As you can see over here, we've overlaid the numbers IE used for LA comparison, and now those of you who have been in other plants, these are 28 yield and 37 oil and 19% packaging labor to standard and 1% packaging waste are rather aggressive. And that would make you number one in potato chips at 11.1. However, know that Charlotte had 10.86, so it wouldn't make you number one by much, and they're supposed to improve next year.
13th period Topeka was 13.43.
Yeah, be careful. You have to be careful on one period, but Topeka's already stated that they're going to beat Charlotte next year, so I would guess in 1984 you'll see some numbers at 12 and 13. Next thing we looked at was tortilla chips. Once again here, the December 84 plan numbers. Move that up some. December 84 plan numbers would give you 2.39 points and would have left you in 15th place out of 22 plants, which is some way to go if you want to be low-cost producer. Again, you can see some of the numbers we used in the LA comparison. 102 yield, and that was a 0.5% gain to standard on oil. 0.8 packaging waste and 10% gain in processing labor were all rather ambitious. Would have still left you in 3rd place, behind Allen Park at 4.75 and Topeka at 4.66. 22 plants.
Wait a minute, Bob. Dave. Bob has a question.
Is that when you assumed that potato chips would start up first, or did
Yes,
Yes.
and we did assume that potato chips would start first.
July.
That's right.
Corn chips, again, the same thing. And even with the revised goals out of IE, you still would have only been 6th, behind plants like Monroe, Salisbury, Lubbock, Houston, and Chamblee. So the point here is just to give you a feel for what's ahead. Hence the boxes at the top. And secondly, we tried to hit all of the key areas that we felt were important. The important thing here, and the measures will change depending on whether you're measuring daily, weekly, or for a period. Daily you may only measure packaging QI. Weekly you may measure plant market QIs, and on a period, of course, you use national QIs. So what you would use on daily, weekly period would depend on what it is, but this is the kind of sheet that the plant services manager should have on Wally's desk at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and Wally would know how we did yesterday. Hopefully, and everybody else in the plant would. Now again, what's important here. These are certainly not the only measures. These are the ones we feel will be able to tell you if you were meeting your objectives in the base case. There are a lot of other measures out there. Let's say you were having a problem in yield in potato chips. I mean, you could be looking at spoilage and salvage. You could be looking at average weights in the line. You could be looking at how much you threw away. There's a whole bunch of things you could be looking at. And those would be, as we talked about here, subset indicators. You should develop those and be doing those also on a regular basis, so that when a blip comes here and it says, hey, wait a minute, I got a problem in yield in potato chips, I've got somewhere to go to figure out what that problem was. But this is your one-page scorecard, so to speak. The things that measure 90 to 95% of what you're doing. Harry, now go into a little of the.
If you want to change, tell me, because we'll commit to March 1st of putting the data together in the graphical format. But if I got to do that, I need to start Tuesday. So I'll talk to you, and we'll.
Why don't I shake my head?
Okay. All right, you got it.
I guess that means I'm starting on Monday, right?
We're starting on Monday. We have an extra day.
Absolutely.
Yes, Jim.
Just with regard to the formatting of data, the only question I had was the accident rate for 100,000 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my knowledge, we don't measure that rate like that anywhere in the company.
Frequency, what is it
Per million
pounds?
Per million
Per million man hours.
Okay, we'll do it that way.
Okay.
Let's go into that one.
Consistency sake.
Harry, let me just throw something else, because this is an interesting point. For the first time, and I think this is happening as of the area meeting, there is information available via Crawford and Company on workers' compensation costs, and this is data that we've never seen in any prior year. So you're beginning to see, as opposed to just tracking accident frequency rates and accidents and the 712 charges, that they're really seeing actual dollars as opposed to some theoretical number. We're finding that there is not necessarily a relationship between decrease of accident frequency and actual workers' compensation costs. So all I'm throwing out to your group and to the Casa Grande staff is to look at, in addition to what you've recommended, which is certainly important, the actual workers' compensation dollars, because it has surprised the hell out of everybody that there's been a decrease in accidents and total accident frequency rate, total lost time accident frequency rate, and corresponding increase. Right.
And the social atmosphere and the attitudes of people, because it was our feeling that that would create an impact. Depending on the environment that you have set up in the Casa Grande plant, it may or may not be prone to accidents.
Yeah, that is extremely important. The thing that really surprised us is that
Certainly, we understand what we're doing, because this is a type of system that's very difficult to change once it's there, and pretty much needs to be right the first time. So we thought maybe the first thing we better do is define a mission so that we absolutely understand, all of us, why we're doing this. So we defined a mission statement to provide the Casa Grande plant with a compensation rewards plan which is compatible and integrated with the organizational design and the external environment. I think there are a couple of key words here that we need to be sure we understand. Compatible and integrated with organizational design. It has to fit into the high-performance structure. Whatever we put in here has to go in right, mesh and fit and be integrated into the entire organizational design. It also has to satisfy the needs of the external environment, which would be the local environment, the local economy, the local competitiveness of the salary structures, and the corporate demands that are put upon Casa Grande to comply with the Frito-Lay system. So we got together and said, these are mission statements that we have to satisfy when we come up with a final proposal for a compensation plan. So with the mission statement firmly in mind, we decided what are the objectives that we have to come out of this meeting with that will have to be accomplished, not necessarily today, but that have to be accomplished prior to the compensation plan going into effect. We thought it was necessary, first of all, to review the theories of compensation. You know, we need to stand back, look at this whole thing, and say, why do we have compensation in the first place? Particularly in a high-performance system, what are the elements and objectives of compensation? So we did that. We took time yesterday to review just the theories of why do we pay people. Then the second objective is we had to examine the fit between the compensation reward system and the recommended organizational design. And that is that the base compensation, total compensation, and the reward system, again, we have to be sure that all of those fit into high-performance organizational design, Casa Grande. We've decided that we need to, first of all, talk about base compensation, that is, base salaries. Total salaries, are we going to have an incentive plan? Or are we not going to have an incentive plan? One of the objectives was that that decision had to be made. And then total reward systems, rewards being defined primarily as benefits. What are they? How are they integrated into the total compensation picture? Is compensation really being a part of a total rewards package that the management and technicians of Casa Grande will have to have? Then another objective was to examine and recommend compensation rewards for the delivery unit, or the delivery team, which is a separate team, really hasn't been defined yet, but that system has to, again, integrate and fit with the Casa Grande system. So we decided that one of the objectives is to take a very then we said, once we have all the recommended compensation plans, structures, another vital objective is to ensure the understanding and the acceptance of that plan by the Casa Grande Planning Group and corporate management. That is, we will make a proposal. We will be sure that the Casa Grande staff understands the proposal, accepts the proposal, and secondly, we get approval and buy-in by corporate management, which obviously has to happen before any proposal can be effective. So with the mission statement and some objectives, we decided, where do we go from here? What are the next steps? The first step we decided was to look at compensation theory review. Why compensation in the first place? We made a list of objectives and elements of a compensation system. Asked Herb to come in and help us a little bit with this. The objectives of compensation, obviously, we want to remain non-union. We want to devise a system that will provide stability and retention for the employees, that will prompt the employees to do something over and above the normal duties. We want to be sure that it supplies whatever it needs to do a dependable job. Many, many objectives to pay. And the elements being, do you put in total system rewards package, group system rewards, individual rewards? How does that tie in with job design, goal identification? And what's the positives and negatives, the advantages and disadvantages of each of these, so that we can decide which area of compensation we need to concentrate on. So we spent about an hour and a half talking about, do we really understand why we're having compensation? We then analyzed the relationships between the objectives and the elements, again, to try and decide where are the positives and the negatives. What parts of compensation do you want to stress? What parts do you possibly want to avoid? To be sure, again, that all this fits in with the organizational design. Once we established these relationships, then the six of us talked about the personal philosophies, our own personal philosophies about compensation. We wanted to be sure that we were all in the same boat, that we all understood exactly where we were going, and that we agreed that philosophically certain parts of compensation plans had to be addressed. We did that. That led then into a conceptual framework for what's this thing going to look like when we get all through. Some philosophies. Money is not a motivator. People work for money to satisfy some of the Maslow things that we all know about, basic security, these type things. But once that's satisfied, money really doesn't motivate people per se. Fewer pay levels are better. Administrative-wise, it's much easier to control few pay layers as opposed to many, many, many layers. The employee, first of all, doesn't understand the system. Second of all, management has a terrible time trying to manage the system. So we want to go in with something that has very few pay levels. Incentives. You either have them for everybody or you have them for nobody. The basic decision about do you have incentives we still haven't made, but the philosophy is you either have them or you don't have them. You don't have one part of the group get them and another part of the group don't get them. You got a conflict situation. Whatever benefits package that comes in ought to be basically equitable with Frito-Lay systems and equitable among all parts of the plant. So again, you avoid any possible conflicts if you can help it, between one group getting certain benefits and another group not getting certain benefits.
Dan, would that apply to the delivery system group also? Because you had them as part of your...
The benefits package, I would think certainly would. Benefits mean retirement, vacation.
You mean incentives or benefits?
Benefits. I'm talking about benefit package. Would that apply to the delivery system as well as the plant in the same manner?
Whatever traditional non-union benefits are offered to most Frito-Lay employees.
Jeff, does that also include non-exempt as a group?
Exempt, non-exempt technicians. Now, later on, we'll talk about which group gets what, in our opinion. But as close as possible, without trying to design a system where everybody is basically the same. Again, it's future state as opposed necessarily to startup. Career development must be part of the compensation strategy. That is, along with pay, benefits, need some career development steps in there, which is different from our traditional system, particularly with the technicians, where basically there's not a career development step. An integral part of this system should include career development. Salary progression must be part, again, of the action plan to make all this happen. That is, salary progression not basically on strictly a timeline, an automatic raise, but upon some type of a skill proficiency rating. The system must have designed into it the fact that just because you've been here 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, you don't automatically get a raise. There are some skill proficiency measurements tied to compensation.
Jack, is that different from the original proposal, that idea?
No, not necessarily. The original proposal was a stair step, 3 months, 6 months. And we don't know yet what time frame we're having, but we're just simply
Okay, but
saying
it's
that
still-
at some point,
You're saying it's still based on
it will be
showing
based
the
upon performance and some skill development,
Okay.
as opposed to just automatic time.
Before you put that, once a person gets to this generalist, specialist level, looking at career development now, what does he do?
Once they become the generalist specialist, Dave, could we hold all this till we get all through? Okay, then we'll come back with question and answer type thing. That this entire package ought to have some mechanism for measuring both team and individual performance. That, you know, it's quite possible that you could have poor team performance and possibly some individuals within the team being better than others. So when you do your career development and your performance compensation, that you look at both the team and the individuals. Vice versa, you could have some good team performance with some individuals that are not doing what they need to do to progress through the system. And competition or compensation must be competitive with the local labor market. That is, whatever we put in here has to be competitive with what other industries in the local market, and we must be sure that we can retain our people with whatever package we put in. So, with those philosophies in mind, conceptual framework, again, fewer salary ranges than a traditional plan. Fewer probably being 5 or less. We're not real sure if it's 2 or 3, 4 at this stage of the game, but we're talking about pay levels will be 2, 3, 4 levels only. Starting pay, another range above that. Now there might be ranges within each level, but there will only be a few basic levels. They will fit with the generalist specialist definition that will tie the organizational design semantics of generalist specialist to the compensation system. That is, with pay levels designed for each generalist specialist role. Progression depends on proven proficiency and skill development. And again, the fact that it's not an automatic time system. Career development reviews will take place. It'll be built in, it'll be mandatory that somebody in management sit down with the technician and review their career development and what they need to do to approach the next compensation level. And the compensation system will be reviewed annually. It doesn't say that there will be an automatic across-the-board increase annually. It just simply says that the ranges, once established, should be reviewed on an annual basis, and then adjustments in those ranges be made. Not necessarily on an across-the-board percentage, but based upon what the local market is doing, we need to be prepared to adjust if necessary. We would propose that the present management and non-exempt compensation systems be put in intact as they are now. We would not propose any changes in present exempt or clerical systems. Whatever is in place right now for managers and what we currently call 102s would come right into Casa Grande as they are. So with this in mind, we tried to develop next what action steps, what plans have to take place to make all this conceptual framework a reality, and some time dates. Jim has the information on that.
With regard to taking all that information, the group then went back and said, okay, what do we got to go do next to make a compensation system a reality? And these labels up here, we have a strategy, an action, and a PPR, which is the person of primary responsibility. And that's the person that's going to drive the activity, may not do it all, but at least make sure that it happens. What we felt we needed to do first is, based on the philosophical framework that we've established, is to prepare one alternative with regard to the base compensation proposal. Is take some of the ideas that we've had and establish timeframes and a pay scale into that compensation framework. And Gene is going to have that done by the 28th of February. We're just going to take the things that we talked about yesterday, the information that he gathered yesterday, and start applying it to something that's realistic that fits with Casa Grande. What we felt we needed to do in addition to that would be to ensure that the competitiveness of the base compensation proposal, and we've got some labor market data that we can review to make that happen. So these two go hand in hand, and once again, Mr. Scotty has the responsibility to make that happen. Another item that we felt was necessary was to examine other HPS systems and their total compensation systems. We're going to do this through contacts and visits with other companies. There's discussion about going to Firestone, Zilog. Karen, you talked about going up to Connecticut. We want to be able to get hooked into those kinds of visits and to examine those systems if at all possible. Gene also has some names of some other companies that he's going to be contacting with regard to gathering that information. And the purpose here is to look at the total compensation package and help us develop or help us make a decision with regard to the incentives question. Once we've gathered that information, we'll review that information and learnings and compare it to our proposal. We'll submit those findings and conclusions at that point by 3/22 to this group, the Compensation Rewards Group, and also the Planning Group at Casa Grande. So by 3/22, we'll be able to see at least a framework of a compensation system for the plan. One of the things that the Casa Grande core group needs to do is to develop those job criteria, if you will, and progressions. And what we mean by that is, for example, in potato chip processing, we have set a generalist by the end of this time frame should be able to accomplish these tasks. We need to sit down and develop that more specifically with regard to expectation, and that will drive someone's movement through a particular range. So that's a task that each of the core planning group needs to handle. Look at that being a conversion unit review, that we go back and identify generalist and specialist tasks for each conversion unit and then plug in those factors. Finally, we're going to develop that final proposal, review all the data that we have, and whatever the Casa Grande group has come up with regard to recommendations at that point. And then by 3/27, we'll have a final proposal outline at that point, and then obtain a buy-in from the Casa Grande group at least by the 30th of March. That we'll have a product that is specific in nature, that not only does the compensation and rewards team feel good about, but also the Casa Grande planning group feel good about. And then finally, of course, by 4/6, we need to secure headquarters approval
folks like Lyle Mueller, Chuck Norb, Dan Adams, Bill Bensel, tie those people into our thinking and get their buy-off. So we've got a lot of activity, once again, concentrated in the month of March, and I just told Andy to forget about seeing his newborn when it comes, and we're all just going to have to chunk it out. A couple other things that we had with regard to the rewards issues, and that's the benefits issues as we see them, is that we needed to sort of get a feel for the culture in the community relative to benefits. We needed to find out whether that was really an important issue with people. For example, if there's some history of labor management conflict with regard to differences in benefits, and that's pretty apparent in the culture, then it's an important issue to us to have the same benefits program for all employees. If it's not an issue, then don't mess with it. So I'm gonna take a look at that environment by the 31st of March and see whether or not that is a factor that we need to consider. If it is a factor, then we need to explore whether or not the corporation is going to be receptive to letting us implement the same flex benefits program for all employees. And some of the differences, for example, is an hourly employee typically in Frito-Lay does not have long-term disability, whereas a salaried employee in the driver does. So we need to examine where those differences are and explore the acceptance of the corporation to install the same package in Casa Grande. And that'll be accomplished by Wally and myself by the 15th of April. Once again, this information may say it's not an issue, it's dropped at that point, and we implement whatever we have presently in the corporation. Taking a look at the distribution side of the house, we talked a little bit about distribution with Dick yesterday, and decided that what needs to happen before the compensation and reward system takes place is, first of all, the Casa Grande group, the plant needs to drive a little bit, needs to put something together that they're happy with. And then the distribution group needs to complete a task and variance analysis, taking a look at how work's performed and the structure of work within the distribution function, go through the planning process, the organizational effectiveness process before a compensation system can be developed. And once again, Dick Marin will get that group together and establish at least a rough cut of that by the 22nd of March. It came up earlier that we're going to have some people on board before we got a compensation system. And just sort of as a final action plan, we need to sit down and identify staffing requirements and the hiring criteria for those staffing requirements that are necessary prior to 4/15. So any staffing requirements that are necessary prior to 4/15, by next week, we're going to identify those and we're going to say these are the kind of people that we want to fill those kinds of jobs. After that, we're going to establish a tentative entry rate for those technicians. That Gene and I will take a rough cut at the labor market information that we have and say, hey, here's the starting rate for you, and communicate that information during the recruiting posture. And then also very important is to develop a communication to those technicians hired relative to compensation, benefits, organizational design. Let that individual know at that point in time, here's what it looks like, okay? And let them know up front that, hey, we're still working on this, and your rate of pay may change, it may not. But we need to put together that strategy with how we're gonna manage those expectations right out of the box, and that'll be completed by the Casa Grande planning group by March 7th. Kind of in summary, we've given I think some conceptual framework. We have some ideas about where we're headed from here. It'll become more apparent within the next 2 weeks, specifically what that compensation recommendation could possibly look like.
Yeah, a couple of charts back, Jack said something about career development, originally, in the pack design, we talked about the technicians doing some assessment of the skills in their own group. Is that still the thinking, that the technicians would decide competency rating?
They would participate in that. I think that's one of the things that we talked about. Also here with the compensation system review, we talked about technicians being involved in that process also.
I think there's a critical point here in the fact that they will participate, they will not control.
Right.
And the manager will have the ultimate decisions about those type of things, but input from other members of the team will be put into the career development path, but the final decisions would still be made.
Seems to be getting higher, and I'm becoming a little bit concerned that we get to a point where we don't do anything. And I would rather opt that you guys take a look at what Herb calls minimum critical specifications, the thing that might hurt us least. If it's right to do, let's go ahead and do it, because we have definitely got to get on with putting this system together. And if there are some adjustments we have to make after we get into it, and we see that those things are reasonable to do, then we would go ahead and adjust it. But try to develop it around some minimum critical specification. What do you need to get done that will hurt you least over the long term? And maybe some short-term changes that we'll make. But I don't want the group to be getting involved in installing a system because we have an apprehension that